Hi there, welcome to this PHP practical lecture. First we're going to study and we're going to focus on how to connect your PHP application with a MySQL database. So how actually the connection works, how to do in a proper way, in a way that we are basically learning software development, and that's the object-oriented way. For that, we're going to look into, let me click, the history of this application that we have here, and we're going to check out the specific commits, specific revisions in this history to actually study those important concepts and realize how that is done. Part of those, some of those concepts are how to connect, of course, how to fetch, so how to execute queries, how to fetch the data, and in a procedural way. So we understand the difference between purely calling functions, like we do in this revision, and we compare in an object using an object-oriented interface, like in this one. And then we look into a very important concept, which is the active record design pattern. And if we understand that, then we will be ready for creating our PHP applications based on a database or database-driven PHP applications. So let's go ahead and start with checking out the index PHP implemented with basic structure. So we understand what application we're talking about here. And now we have checked this out. Let's look into the project. Let's hide this. This is the project. This is the source folder. I have a public folder and the index PHP. Very, very simple. Let's zoom in and let's find out that this is basically the main application at this point. So I do have, as you can see in the body, a header section, a main section, and a footer section. There is no PHP code in the main section, but there is some PHP code here already in the footer, which is basically displaying the date. And our work is going to be found in this specific main from now on, main section, okay? So at this point, since I checked out, I'm gonna manually deploy this checked out version to my web server. It has been deployed. Of course, I'm using it locally. So let's have a look at that application. I'm gonna refresh this page. And this is basically the application about. It's a teacher management system, in which basically I'm querying a teacher's table at the database level. If you're more interested in the database layer, then I only have we'll be working with this specific teacher table at the database layer. So here, as you can see, is a very simple table with the auto increment, of course, a column which uniquely identifies each row, and more common columns that for holding essential information about that teacher's record, like name, date of birth, scale, salary, and this is some metadata of that specific record, created on and updated on. Some values are initialized, some others are still null. But anyway, we'll see as we analyze the application in the future revisions. As I said, there is nothing in the main. There is only a footer section displaying the date, and we see that PHP is actually working today. This is today's date. So we are ready to continue checking out another revision and looking into how to query this database. Let's query all the teachers from the database with a procedural way. Force the checkout. Let's hide this for a moment. And as you can see, well, I accentuated here the different sections that we have: the head, the main, all of this, our space for the application to call to query the database, and the footer over here. Of course, there are more logical ways to divide this application, but we will see that, or we will structure this file or these files or this application as we continue the development. The important thing here is in the main section is how do I actually query a database? Of course, if I need to query a database, I need to first connect to that database, right? And then query, send an SQL statement, fetch whatever result I get from the executed statement, and then process that fetched result. Those four steps that I just mentioned are clearly identifiable here. First, I'm connecting to the database, is this section, up until here actually, until there. Then we are querying the database with a simple select statement. In this case, we're going to select all from teachers and put it into a variable. That's called the querying the database section. And of course, once we get, because we're going to, if successfully we query the database, we're going to get the result, a variable, and then we're going to fetch that result. Think of it, if this is new to you, totally new to you, think of it as getting a box out of this while you execute this query. And here in the fetching, we're basically unboxing each item that we find in the box. And of course, we process. In this case, we just create rows in a table that we in an HTML table that we're trying to accommodate the data received. Okay. In the end, we are actually free the result, and that's to avoid memory leaks with this procedure. Remember that the way we are doing things here, we're querying the database, is just for learning purposes, for comparison purposes, because the way you should implement your PHP applications should be in an object-oriented way, and what you can see here is procedural instead. So it's just for informational purposes and comparison purposes. If it's procedural, of course, we're talking only about functions, and first of all, there are different ways of connecting to databases. So PHP has different interfaces. One is MySQL interface. You write it like that, MySQL interface. Another one is MySQLi, and that's the one we are using in what you're seeing here in this code. And the one that you should actually use is going to be the PDO interface. Okay, so let's have a look. Well, there are different ways. This is the one we will be using after this in the future code. But let's have a look what a procedural way of connecting and querying the database looks like. Here we see the first function, and that's MySQLi underscore connect. And then we pass, as you can see, the 4 parameters so we can connect to the database. This function will return a object, will return something that tells me, well, you are connected to the database. Of course, we need to check if we successfully connected to the database, and that's what we have this specific code over here. So we just check. If there is no connection, we're gonna produce, of course, echo some warning, some error, and then we're gonna kill the script, the current script. Otherwise, we just say congratulations, a successful connection was made, and produce some information so that we know for sure that we have a object, something in the connection. The connection or linked is the same. After this, we are ready to query the database, and guess what? The same interface has a different function for us. So instead of here we use MySQLi connect to initiate, to open the database, let's say, and here we have a MySQLi underscore query to actually start send our queries to tell the database, hey, do this for me, please. And the database is going to send us, of course, the box with the result, with the items that we're asking. In this case, all the teachers, all the teachers that we encounter in the teachers table. And we put it into a result. After that, if that is correctly done, if this is true, then we will have something in the result, our box, and we will create a table in an HTML table, because our purpose here is to input the teacher's data. Each teacher, as you know, is a row in the teacher's table at the database layer, should become a row as well in this HTML table. So how do we do that? Of course, we get the box already. if we get the box, we are ready to fetch the result. And fetching the result, as I already mentioned, is just taking your items out of this box. We're going to use another, so ingenious people have already helped us a lot in the past, so the only thing we need to do is knowing this interface and knowing the functions that allow us to look into the box and take the items, in this case the teachers, out of the box for processing the data as in the table, in the HTML table. So this function over here, MySQLi underscore fetch SOC, means that we are going to look into the box, we're going to open the box, and every single record returned or found in the box, as a teacher, we're going to take that item and put it into a variable called row. So from this moment on, from here until here, I can use this row variable for manipulating or just processing whatever data came from the teacher's table at the database layer. So then I can just access as this for outputting the name of the teacher, for example, or the row date of birth. Since we already know about association arrays, it's not longer needed that we're going to access this code per a numerical index like 0 or 1. No, I don't care about that. I can use the associative array. You pay attention to this function in which we fetch the result. Actually, there's many different ways of fetching the results, but in this case, this interface helps us fetching the result as an associative array. And that's why this is possible, okay? After we process the data, look into this is a while statement. So this happens for every row, hence the name of this variable row. After we do that, we free the result set. So the result previously gathered here, we are going to free that one. And guess what? We're going to use the same interface for freeing that, so we avoid memory leaks in our application. And this is the way. It's just a specific function for that. And after that, we can close our connection or link. And guess what? The interface allows us to do that as well. So that's how you do in a procedural way. Well, now let's check out our other revision and let's compare to this one. Querying all teachers from database with object-oriented PDO. I'm going to check out that one. And here we can compare quickly whatever you find between these commented out lines is the previous version, the procedural version of connecting, querying, fetching, and processing the data. Now we are going to do exactly the same thing, but using the PDO interface. And using the PDO interface, by definition, means using an object-oriented way. Why? Because the interface defines 3 classes. And in order to use PDO, of course, you need to create your object, the PDO object, and then execute your queries for further processing of your data that comes from the database. So here, exactly the same steps, connecting to the database. I'm using actually a try catch statement. So if something happens in the during the connection, we can catch that error and display that error. We can then query the database as before, and of course processing the data and closing the connection. But we will see that is quite different in this approach. So let's start by this time by just setting a breakpoint here. But first let me deploy this version to the local server. There you go. And what we're going to do is debug our application so we can see step by step what is going on in our application. So here I'm going to refresh. Now it looks, the application looks like this. I have my database queried, and now we can just listen for the debug session and start again, and you will see that jumps to our breakpoint. There you go. We are here in our application. If we go back to the browser, you will see this is not this is the previous code. So you will see just it's waiting. It's because we are in a debugging session. What do we have here? The first line is connection. The actual connection. In order to connect, we need a instance of a PDO class. So what we're doing here is exactly that, creating a PDO object. We're going to a step through that to this code, and at the moment that I have executed that line of code, you will see that my variables start appearing over here, and that's quite nice because then I can see the values of my variables up until this point. So I do have my connection, and therefore the success message should also continue appearing. I'm going to just continue with the code, and then I will have my result. But let's see and compare with the previous code. In order to get my result in the previous code, well, you used a function. Here it is. In order to get the result, you just simply use a function with the connection as parameter and the string to query as parameter. Here, what we're doing is using the connection, of course, the PDO object, and using the property query of that object, and simply passing a parameter, which is the SQL statement, as a string, nothing else. So what we are doing now is using properties of an object. After that, of course, we need to fetch our a result. So this still is, if you look carefully into PDO documentation, when you use PDO query, this returns a specific object of the class PDO statement. And to see that, we're going to just iterate here. We are going to step over, and then we have our result. And you will see that PDO statement object is being stored there, an object of this type. And that's because the query statement returns that specific object and puts it, we assign it into the result variable. It's very visible in this here. So whenever I say box, this is the box I'm talking about. Whenever we get this PDO statement, now we need to unbox, right, our items, because we expect here teachers, but the result comes in a box, so we need to unbox it. The unboxing process happens here. So whenever you use the for each statement and you pass the result as row, is exactly the same what we did while fetching using that specific function in the procedural method, and the procedural code, I should say, is this one. See, you pass the result, you pass the box, and then you fetch it onto a row, so you can have an associative array after that. Here, the same is happening. You have your box, you fetch it as a row, or as a record, you could also say, and you process that specific record or that specific row. And after that, you close the connection. So closing the connection is very, very simple. It's just assigning the connection variable to null, giving that pointing to nothing. So removing basically any value that you could contain. And if you can recall, the connection is actually our PDO object. And that's it. Here, as you can see in the comment, it is just an optional step, because if you forget that, that's nothing wrong with it. PHP will automatically do it for you, but it's just as a good practice. Let's step over that code, and we will see that now we are on the row array. And the reason it appears here 14 is because this associative array contains a string identifier, which is the column, which is the column name as an index, or you can also use the normal numeric index for accessing the value of the first column. So it doesn't mean that it has 14 columns or a table behind the scenes in the database layer. It only means that the associative array, in this case, you can access by a string identifier or a numerical identifier. You would see that the value is exactly the same here in both cases. France, in this case, France, teacher France. But there are in reality 7 columns on the table. I'm displaying 2, the teacher's name and the teacher's date of birth. And that is it. So let's see. Let's stop this connection. And let's have a look at the result. Let me refresh it. Oh, sorry. Let me refresh it again. And here we have our exactly the same output, but this time using the PDO interface querying the teacher's table. That's it.